Good evening. Hey, Silver. It's good to see all these people here. John Pert, Bill Moran, Mark Spiradigliosi. Good to see you guys. Julia Parsons, Jim Roberts, Connie, some new people, new faces too. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our VBC Happy Hour. Don Nemchek. My name is Todd DiPastino. I am the executive director of the Veterans Breakfast Club. And the Veterans Breakfast Club is a nonprofit based in Pittsburgh, PA, where I live and where my colleague and friend Sean Hall lives. Hello, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Jim Jameson asked me in a chat why I did not get bitten by a shark because I was in Gloucester, Massachusetts last week. I did not touch the beach. I did not go into the water. I looked at the water. It was very nice, but no, I didn't go in. Anyhow, as I was saying, the Veterans Breakfast Club is a nonprofit. I was just thinking today with a simple proposition, and this is it, that veterans sharing their stories promotes social well-being. In other words, it's good for the veterans and it's good for listeners like people like me and like Sean, who didn't serve in the military, who learn and are inspired by the stories of our veterans. And I think it's healthy for veterans to share their experiences, whether it was combat experience or some other kind of support position. It's good for veterans. It's good for people like me. And that's why we have these programs every Monday night online at 7 p.m. We have in-person events, mostly in Western Pennsylvania. We also have them elsewhere, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit. And hey, Connie's saying hello. I heard Dan and Cheryl Vaughn too. I've been thinking about Dan Vaughn recently. Dan and Cheryl, how are you? I hope you're doing okay. I have something I want to share with you. I think you'll find interesting. So that's why the Veterans Breakfast Club holds these events where we have conversations, where veterans tell stories. We have special panel discussions and programs. We do them in person and online. We have a podcast called The Scuttlebutt that we'll talk about in a little bit. We have a weekly email, VBC Bulletin, that I send out every Monday and that anybody could get. We have a magazine, VBC Magazine, that we publish quarterly and we send out to anybody who wants to receive it. And all of this is at no cost. We really want people to come together, hear the stories, and we want to share the stories every way we can. And one of the key ways we do it is through this VBC Happy Hour. Tonight we have open conversation, but we also have some people who are joining us who I'm looking forward to hearing from. Casey Shelton is one of them. Casey is joining us for the first time from the Monuments Men and Women Foundation. And the work that she does and that the foundation does is really fascinating. And I know Sean has been talking with Casey about coming on and sharing some of that work that they do. But first, let me, good. I'm seeing we have some more people coming on the program we're letting in. Hold on, do I see somebody have their hand up? Did somebody have their hand up? Mark, did you go like this? I'm an old professor. If I see somebody with a hand up, and if you have something to say, we want you to share it with the whole class. All right. So I'm going to share my screen, and this is kind of what we do with the in-person events. And we try and achieve the same vibe online and go around the room and have the veterans share stories. You never quite know what you're going to hear. We want to hear from every branch of service. We want to hear from young and old, men and women, no matter the background, no matter the neighborhood you come from. If you served in the military, I think you have a story to share. And then I've also learned, not coming from a military family and not having served in the military myself, I have learned over the years that when one member of the family enters the service, it really impacts other members of the family. And there's no deeper impact probably than somebody who's career military and who has children. And so we're doing a program a week from tonight on military brats. And we're going to have Rona Simmons and Bernard Lee, who wrote these two books, A Look Back in Time, Volume 1 and Volume 2, about growing up a military brat, Air Force brat, I guess you could say. And also Jim Roberts. And Jim, you are with us tonight. You are an Army veteran yourself, but you grew up, I guess you would call, an Air Force brat. Your father was career Air Force. How many years did he spend in the Air Force, Jim?
He was in 20. He was
20.
in from 40 to 60.
And so that meant that you were in for when were you born, Jim?
I was born in 46, so I was in for 14 years.
14 years. Okay, so the first 14 years of your life, you were an Air Force brat.
Right.
And you lived in how many different places?
I didn't think you were going to show these tonight.
Well, a little sneak peek here.
We moved 10 times in those 14 years.
10 times in 14 years.
Yeah.
And
some of those moves, like if you look at 4, 5, and 6, that was over and across the Panama Canal.
Right.
Three different places.
And so that I'm trying to think of what Panama must have been like in the 1950s.
Well, from the American service point of view, it was a paradise. My dad didn't have enough years in to retire, but had he hit 20 there, he would have stayed, because on a sergeant's retirement income, he could have lived like a king down there.
You could live well.
The locals would line up at the entrance to the base every morning wanting to work as your maid.
Wow.
And so a sergeant could go down and hire a maid and afford to pay them.
And I also see that you spent some time at 8 and 9 here, which I think, was that Keesler?
Right, that was right. We lived off the base and then on the base at Keesler.
At Keesler Air Force Base.
Air Force Base, yeah.
This is a still from a home movie that you took. Is this where you lived?
Well, this was on the base. This was the base trailer court. That's me. We used to make a penny a picket painting the fences. Everything was military. The pickets had to be 2 inches wide, 1.5 inches apart, 3 feet high, and they had to be painted once a year. So in the summertime, we could make a few pennies by painting pickets.
So you painted. So is it? I'm imagining now, just as I'm reading up on what it's like to grow up around military bases. A lot of the stuff when you joined the Army, it was kind of familiar to you. I mean, reveille and I guess taps and saluting and all that kind of stuff.
Right, and since my father was a sergeant, I knew how they felt about lieutenants. So,
did your dad make any wisecracks about you being a lieutenant?
He made some serious cracks when I told him I was going in. He was very proud to the point of tears when he pinned the gold bars on my shoulders at OCS graduation. And but he no, because he was worried about what was going to happen.
Yeah,
he was concerned about the future.
Did he give you any grief about joining the Army instead of the Air Force?
He gave me grief, period.
Okay.
I did not. I made the decision to go without consulting him because I knew he wouldn't like it. So I basically told him after it was a fait accompli. And he basically told him it was my decision. He's going to have to learn to live with it.
Yeah. Wow. Was there a reason why you decided not to join the Air Force and do the Army instead?
I guess a little bit psycho. I figured if I was going in, I was going to go where the action was. I didn't want to sit back in an office. I mean, that's just my own personal attitude for me. I'm not saying everyone needs to be that way, but I was going to go in. They were asking a lot of people my age. I had a college deferment for 4 years, 1 year for teaching, and it just didn't seem fair that I was out while people who didn't have enough money to go to college were getting drafted. So I figured I was going to go in. I was going to go in like that and pay my debt.
Okay, and I don't want to belabor this. I know we're going to talk about this next week, but one final question here, Jim. Are you saying that because you were a teacher, you had an exemption? You could be exempt from the draft?
Yeah, I essentially turned in my 6th exemption when I enlisted, because I taught a year before I went in.
Wow. Thank you, Jim. And they did send you to Vietnam.
Eventually, yeah. I mean, the story is that when I went in, everyone at the in processing station was drafted. So when I sat down at the sergeant's desk, he said, "May I see your letter from the draft board?" I said, "I don't have one. I'm here to enlist." He says, "Oh," and so when he asked me what I did, he said, "Be right back." And this captain came out and said, "Can you come back Thursday? We need to talk to you again." I said, "Sure." So I came back Thursday and they put me in a little private room with a doctor, and I found out the doctor was a psychiatrist. I had to prove I wasn't crazy because in those days, a guy with a college degree and teaching deferment just didn't walk off the street and volunteer for the infantry and say, and I want to go to OCS. So I had to convince him I was sane.
I'm sorry to laugh, but yeah. So you had to convince him you were, oh my gosh. Yeah, okay, that's great, Jim. Thank you. So that's what we're going to be focusing on next Monday night. Military. Yeah, Jim.
One question you might want to ask going forward when you talk to Vietnam veterans, in that era, I don't know about now, when you were asked your serial number began with 2 letters. And those 2 letters told the Army whether, and your drill sergeant, whether you were drafted, enlisted, Army Reserve, or National Guard. And when you were shouting out RA 11-7-23-708, you were immediately looked at as somewhat suspect because you had just volunteered. So
RA stood
Regular
for Regular Army. US stood for a draftee, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding is RA meant real Americans.
Regular Army.
Real Americans.
Okay.
US meant unwilling soldier.
I never. You're the first person I've ever heard to say that. Sorry.
Somebody
Now,
told
we
me
had
that.
interesting comments for the NGs and the Rs, but I won't go into that here.
Yeah. Here's another thing. I see Ken Kazak is with us, and I know that we have a few announcements we want to make before we get on with the conversation, but this is relevant. Ken Kazak, thank you. You very kindly sent me a copy of this wonderful memoir by Jack McLean called Loon, a Marine story. It is so beautifully written, so crisply written, absolutely engaging. I mean, I'm somebody who has read a ton on the Vietnam War and on Marines in the Vietnam War, and this still gets me. And he the theme of the book is kids like him didn't go to Vietnam. He was a kid who was destined for Andover, private school, boarding school, which he went to. Most of the graduates of Andover go to Ivy League colleges, mostly Harvard, but also Yale and Columbia and Dartmouth and elsewhere. He was alone in his class, decided he was not going to go to college and he was going to join the Marine Corps. This is during the height of the Vietnam War in 1967. His family, who came from a very well-established, well-off family, affluent family, thought he was completely crazy. They had no frame of reference for a decision like this. Jack McLean ends up loving the Marine Corps. And but in it, he says when he didn't start out going to the Marines. He went to every branch of service. And he said this. He said he went to the Army. The Army told him it would be a 3-year commitment, and he didn't want that. But they said, if you volunteer for the draft, it'll be a 2-year commitment. So there was something called volunteer. I've heard veterans say, I volunteered for the draft, and I just thought they were kind of joking. But there was something called volunteering. You go to your draft board and you say, I want to be drafted. Bob McCormick, you're nodding your head yes. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, I remember people.
Oh, you're cutting out a little bit. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I remember people doing it.
And I guess the motive to volunteer for the draft was to get it over with, have a little bit of control, and only your commitment would only be 2 years instead of 3 or 4, whatever else it might be, right?
Yeah, you could do that. And you could also, what I did, I signed up for another year after I got in. I volunteered to go to a school.
Okay.
And that put another year on my commitment.
And
my job in the mill was held for 4 years. As long as I came back within 4 years, I still had my job.
You had your job 4 years, and they told you that at the outset.
Oh, yes. That was U.S. Steel standard.
How about that? I didn't realize that. Okay. Any other
to put this in perspective, my father during World War II volunteered for the draft because he was too old to be drafted and couldn't volunteer. And that's how he ended up in the Army Air Corps.
And how old was he?
He was 40 at the time.
Wow, old man, even for World War II. How interesting. Okay. So yeah, and I want to talk a little bit more about this book, and we certainly want to have Jack McLean on the program some point. But let me talk a little bit more about events we have coming up. We have a very busy week next week. After the program on Military Brats on Monday night, we have an in-person event here in Pittsburgh and Bethel Park on Tuesday, July 26th at 8:30 a.m. These events go from 8:30 to 10:30. I work the room just like I am in this picture with the microphone. We try to show a picture of an older veteran or of a veteran back when they were in the service on the screen. In this case, it's 101-year-old Pete Edwards, who's a P-51 pilot. He likes to come to our Bethel Park events, and we always like to have him tell a story or two. In this picture, he was, I believe, remembering Pearl Harbor, and he was a college student when Pearl Harbor happened, and he got very choked up just remembering that day. On that night, then, we're going to be back on here on Zoom with our Greatest Generation Live program. You'll remember that we had on June 21st scheduled Charles Stanley Jr., the author of Lost Airmen, the epic rescue of World War II U.S. bomber crews stranded behind enemy lines. These were 13 B-24 crews that were shot down in Yugoslavia in late 1944, and they were rescued by Yugoslavian partisans. And they were able to escape Nazi-occupied Yugoslavia and reach back home. One of those people was Charles Stanley's father, and Charles Stanley Jr. became a historian and ended up writing this book. We're going to have him on next Tuesday, July 26th at 7 p.m. And then I also wanted to let people know, last week I was visiting my father-in-law in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And I took one day and went to Boston and toured the USS Constitution Old Ironsides, met with some people at the USS Constitution Museum, and we decided we're going to do an event on October 21st, which is the 225th birthday of the USS Constitution. They're going to make a big deal out of it. They decided they're going to have the Veterans Breakfast Club kind of host a veteran storytelling event. We're going to have people who served on the Constitution. We're going to have people who are currently serving on the Constitution. And then we're going to have other veterans, invite veterans from around the region in Boston to come and join the festivities and share their stories also, just like we do at our events here in Pittsburgh. And I thought, boy, Boston in the fall can be really nice. So maybe we should do a trip there. And I just thought for those people who live outside of the Boston area, who are interested in touring the Constitution and being part of this weekend celebration, we will organize a trip. We'll probably stay at the Residence Inn, which is right next to the USS Constitution. We'll see some other sites in the area, and I'll get details together. We'll probably book some kind of a group air flight from Pittsburgh, but also we could book travel arrangements for people who are outside of Pittsburgh who want to join us. If you are interested in joining us, this is not a commitment or anything, but if you have any interest in joining us whatsoever, let me know, just so that I have a sense of the numbers that we're talking about, because we'll probably schedule different kinds of trip depending on the numbers that we have. So I will be following up with details on this very soon. Sean, you have a scuttlebutt that was released today.
Yeah, that's not the best picture of me, but
no, it's not. But it's hard to get a good picture of you, Sean.
Yeah, it's true. We had on retired Colonel Walter Hurd. He is head of the Army's Transition Assistance Program. This came out of sort of a passion project. I was interested in the retirement from the military. How do you retire from the military? And actually spoke with Brad Washbaugh about this. He directed me to the TAP programs and reached out to them, and they got back and said, yeah, we'd love to come on. So Colonel Hurd talks a lot about what they offer about the TAP program, how transitioning servicemen and women, how they go about getting into the program and what they need to do to successfully transition into careers into the civilian world. But also what's interesting is that Colonel Hurd is a 6th generation veteran in his family. His family dates back to the American Revolution of serving. We get a little bit into that near the end, and the book that he wrote, which I believe is called Unconventional Warrior. So definitely check it out on our website. I'll put the link here in the chat.
Thank you, Sean. Don Nemchek, you have your hand up. Don,
Yeah,
I was on the road I was on the road today. I got to tell you, I was driving to Indiana, PA to pick up 20 boxes of VBC magazine, and I was listening to the radio, and lo and behold, I heard your voice.
Well, you'll never know where you'll find me, Todd. Sometimes you let a sailor uncontrolled like that, we pop up everywhere.
That's right. How are you?
I'm doing well, and good evening to everyone. Just very quickly, Todd, in your visit to Boston, I'm very interested in that because we did a trip to Boston on July 4th, 2019. But in addition to the USS Constitution, there's a Navy destroyer, the USS Cason Young, named after a Medal of Honor winner for his heroics in Pearl Harbor. And that's an excellent tour to get a feel of what a Navy destroyer is all about. So just a suggestion, keep that in mind and count me in for that trip.
Oh, we are already, I met with the Constitution people and already built that in, a tour of the Cason Young. That is a World War II era destroyer. I've got to say, I'm more interested in the destroyer than the USS Constitution. I mean, Constitution is beautiful, it's wonderful, it's historic, but boy, it'll be so cool for me after hearing so many tin can sailor stories from World War II to actually tour a destroyer, and having so many of our veterans who served on destroyers to get a good look at the vessel that so many of us, Fletcher class destroyer. Thank you, Don. Wonderful suggestion. Absolutely, we're all over that. Yes. Okay. So yeah, do let me know. I'll put you down, Don, as being interested. Hey, I want to let everybody know we publish a quarterly magazine called VBC Magazine. It's sent out for free to anybody who wants it. If you don't get it, it's because we don't have your address. We'd be happy to send it to you. It's 2 pages, and we ran out. We handed out so many of these recently that I had to order 1,500 more, and I drove to Indiana, PA, and picked them up. And so let us know if you're interested in getting the magazine. If you don't get it already, you can just email me at todd@veteransbreakfastclub.org, and we'll send one out. A couple more announcements. We are having the blood drive with Vitalant. We get $15 for every donation that is made for the VBC. You use a special code. You could go to vitalant.org and schedule it, or you could call the phone number, which is 412-209-7000. And you use the code D062, but you could just say, I want this to be part of the Veterans Breakfast Club blood drive. And then we'll get $15. Don, I do expect you to donate double the amount of blood, and maybe we'll get $30. That's what I encourage people to do. I mean, obviously, Don Nemchik, we want you to stay alive. I mean, we don't want them to take so much blood from you that, you can't continue on, but I mean, you could spare more than a pint or two. We have a coffee, and I just got an email from Bamboo Bob today, who calls himself Rob. And Bamboo Bob is he sources coffee in Vietnam. And when we went to Vietnam, the coffee was wonderful. That was one of the things that many of us really enjoyed about the coffee. These are family run coffee farms. He sources the coffee from these farms, and we sell them. And again, every kind of purchase made, the Veterans Breakfast Club gets $2.89. Yes, Brad Washabaugh.
Well, I tell you, Todd, we're on our 3rd shipment of that coffee. My wife and I enjoy it so much, we won't drink anything else now. We enjoy the take the left turn at Cason. It's outstanding.
That's the best
coffee.
That's the best. I mean, I like the Cason coffee the best, but the Turkish coffee is also really good, but you have to make it right. Ken Gamble. Hi, Ken. I see you have your hand up. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hear me?
It's a little faint. I can hear you, though. Yes.
Well, I'd just like to explain to the guys, especially since I've seen some Vietnam veterans on there, about the foundation that we have.
Oh, I'm getting to you, Ken. I'm getting to you. Don't worry. I've got slides. I've got your website I'm going to share.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead. Just holler at me when you get ready.
I will holler at you when we get ready. Absolutely. And I love are you originally from Tennessee?
Born and bred, man.
That is a wonderful Tennessee accent. Thank you very much for joining us, Ken. Ken is the founder and the director of the Orange Heart Medal Foundation. and they've done fascinating stuff, setting up a Agent Orange memorial in Tennessee. And you have the medal that we'll talk to Ken about his service, a Navy veteran. Thank you, Ken, for joining us tonight. But before we do, of course, you all know that we do have two sponsors, and we want to recognize and acknowledge our sponsors. We're very grateful to D&D Auto Salvage. They have two locations here in Western Pennsylvania, in Tarentum and Lawrenceville. They are an auto salvage and metal recycling company. They started over 50 years ago as a small junkyard, and now they're a state-of-the-art metal recycling facility. They deal with individuals. They deal with companies large and small. You can get a quote, and you can learn more about what they do at dndautosalvage.com. That's dndautosalvage.com. They have been such steadfast supporters of the Veterans Breakfast Club and the veterans community here in Western Pennsylvania, and I cannot thank them enough. I'm looking forward to having a conversation later this week with Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. They are another sponsor. They do wonderful work trying to get Americans to quit using tobacco, vaping, smoking, chewing tobacco. They educate people on the hazards of tobacco use. They advocate for healthier public policies around tobacco use. And they have a quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. They assist and counsel people in quitting tobacco use. You can find out more at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. That's tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. And again, I'm meeting with them, the Tobacco-Free Adagio Health, later this week about sponsoring more Veterans Breakfast Club events, and also about, we did a podcast with them about tobacco use in the military, and I think we'd like to do something like that again. So that's going to be the focus, I think, of the conversation with Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. All right, let's see. Hey, before we get into the general conversation, we'll start with Ken. One more thing I want to say, and this is a thank you to Sean Hall. Sean works very hard and expertly for the Veterans Breakfast Club, and he has done so for over 2 years. And he's not a veteran. He does not come from a military family. I have been able to watch his, you're not too young, Sean. You're what? 40, 39?
40.
40. See, you're 40. He's not. That's young to me and to these men and women. But he's no kid. But I wasn't a kid either. I was probably about 40 years old when it really struck me, and when I really started learning about what serving in the military was like. And it's so cool to see day by day, week by week, how Sean has kind of grown in the veterans community and really come to appreciate and understand, I think, our veterans so beautifully. And he's really dedicated. It's not just a job, it's a real vocation. And I mentioned to Sean months ago that I have a few dream programs I want to do, reach programs that just sound so great to me, so fascinating to me. And one of them, and this will sound strange, one of them is I wanted to do a program with Pan Am Airlines flight attendants who flew in and out of Vietnam. I don't know how you reach them. I don't know how you get in contact with them. And I said, so Sean did it. He pulled it off. He worked for a long time contacting they were called stewardesses then, former Pan Am stewardesses who volunteered to fly servicemen and women into Vietnam and out. 91% of all those who served in Vietnam went by commercial airline into Vietnam and out. Almost all of them, if you went on R&R, you went on commercial airline. By far the biggest airline was Pan Am World Airways, and they had the largest contract with the Defense Department, and all those Pan Am flights were staffed and flown by civilians who volunteered for it. And Sean, how in the world were you able to schedule a 2-part special with our Pan Am veterans?
Well, I appreciate those kind words, Todd, very much. And I will definitely not take all the credit. Read a wonderful article that you passed on to me from Sarah Rose on the Washington Post about these stewardesses, flight attendants, and reached out to her, and she said, hey, feel free to try to contact them. So we did a lot of research on trying to dive into all the names that were in the article. A couple of them got back to me, and eventually I found myself connected with a Becky Sprecher. I believe that's how you pronounce her last name, maybe Sprecher, but she has been instrumental in developing these programs. She has a very wide network of flight attendants that she talks with, and she reached out, and we are still getting more women to come and join us, including who you believe you saw there, Al Topping will be joining us. He was portrayed by James Earl Jones in the TV movie Last Flight Out. This became such a big story and a big program that I talked with Todd about it, and we decided that we were going to split it in two. So the first episode on August 1st is going to deal with Pan Am's relationship with the government. How did this come about? The history of that, as well as the R&R flights. This is a side of the Vietnam War that many people don't know about. The stories of these women who would be the last face that many Americans would see and the first face that many Americans would see when they were coming home. But there's a whole separate part to this conversation other than the R&R flights. There's the Operation Baby Lift, there's the Last Flight Out, and there are the refugees. So we're going to tackle those subjects in the follow-up part 2 conversation on August 8th. And we're going to have flight attendants who were a part of all of these programs coming on to talk about this, including the journalist, Sarah Rose. I believe she'll be joining us on August 1st to come and talk as well. So again, I will definitely not take all the credit, but I'm certainly very happy that a lot of women are seeing that everybody's coming together to talk about this. And I'm trying really hard to get some of the babies who were a part of Operation Baby Lift, who are much older, obviously adults now in careers, they do get-togethers. And I'm trying to get some of them to come on the following week as well. So stay tuned.
And what's so cool is that these women who served on these flights, it clearly impacted the rest of their lives. I mean, it clearly kind of shaped in many ways the rest of their lives. And this service, although it was in the civilian sector, is so meaningful to them. And they're powerfully connected with the veterans they served. And but because they're not veterans, they don't get the recognition, and they don't have the camaraderie that a lot of veterans can have. So I'm just really, I think it's just so neat to be able to bring together some of the people. And I'm looking around this Zoom room here, must have come into Vietnam by air, by one of these commercial airlines, and bring together the people who worked on the flights. I think that'll be fun. So that'll be our VBC happy hour, August 1st and August 8th. All right. Anything else here? Before we get to Ken, I want Ken Gamble to talk about his foundation. Cliff, I see you've joined us. I don't remember seeing you before. Cliff Pfeiffer?
Pfeiffer, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Well, this is my first time on with you guys. I happened to see your article in the VBA magazine, and I said, hey, yes. And so I thought, well, I'm going to get on tonight and just see what you guys are all about. I'm glad to be here.
Very good, Cliff. Thank you. And there's a helicopter. Is that a Huey behind you?
That's a Huey. That's a picture of my boat. I served with the U.S. Navy, Special Forces, Brown Water Navy. I was in Vietnam in 68 and 69.
Navy, Special Forces, Brown Water Navy. What was your job? What did you do?
Well, I actually had a rate of engineman, but after I got there, I was a machine gunner.
Right. Sorry to laugh, but yeah. It turns out they didn't have They needed a machine gunner more than an engineman.
Well, if the engines were running, then that was okay,
Yeah, right.
But a lot of time spent in the Delta over there. Actually, our outfit was the only joint connected operation, Army Navy, of any unit in Vietnam.
This is the Riverine Force, right?
Yes, Mobile Riverine Force.
Yes. Okay. So Sean and I just had a meeting last week where that was one of the subjects, one of our dream subjects. We want to do a program with Riverine Force veterans. And I understand that there's a documentary being made.
There is. For years now, we've had a internet membership of both Army and Navy. and it's actually MRFA.org, Mobile River Reinforced Army. And there's a production studio in California that's trying to put together a documentary on the Mobile River Reinforce. And so they've been working on it for about a year. They do have a trailer that's out. I'm hoping that there's one of my ships. That was probably the USS Nueces.
Wow, look at that.
I was on that mission that day and saw that very flamethrower in front of me.
Did you really? Oh,
yep.
Man. I got to say, some of this is a really fascinating subject for me. And I'm going to go back to this picture. This picture here. I got to say, these are some of the ugliest boats I've ever seen, Cliff.
What those were World War II APL transport ships that were used during World War II. When we first got involved in Vietnam in the early 60s, they had they always gave an operational name, and it was called Market Time. So our Navy decided that we were going to patrol the coastline and try to stop reinforcements, resupply to the Viet Cong in the Delta. And after a few years, they realized that just wasn't enough. So they decided to go inland in the Delta, and it now became an operation called Game Warden.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to be supplied. And so they brought these, I think the most I ever saw at one time was probably 3 of these troop ships. But we were tied up off the base called Dong Tam.
Mm-hmm.
And Dong Tam was a half Army base, half Navy base. We controlled the harbor that they had dug out. It was all reclaimed jungle from a swamp. And it was finished, I believe, in 64, maybe 65. But that was our base of support. Where we really operated out of was being tied up to these troop ships. And so they had these pontoons that you could see in that picture on the side of the ship, and that's where we would tie up our river boats. And when we were there, we were able to get a hot shower, hot meal. But other than that, we lived on those river boats. We had 7-man crews. It was like a houseboat with guns.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy. And I would imagine a big fat target out there on the river.
Pretty much, because we could only go about 5 knots. Fully loaded, that one little tango boat, which was a converted LCM6,
Mm-hmm.
weighed 80 tons. We had a 7-man crew, and we had more firepower on a tango boat than we had people to actually fire the weapons.
Wow. Cliff, if you wouldn't mind, either in the chat, maybe if you want to give your email address or
Sure.
whatever, I'd love to be able to make sure that I'm able to contact you to schedule a program about the Mobile River Reinforce. I'm going to contact the Arbalos. I think that's their name, Arbalos.
Yes.
Who are making the film. And I know a few other vets. I think it would be a fascinating conversation about a part of the war that we don't hear that much about.
Well, they call me the storyteller because I've got so many stories. After I retired, I was kind of wandering around for a year and ended up, I became the vice president of Rocky Mountain Honor Flight. And I did that for 6 years. So I came across a ton of World War II veterans. I've got some stories of what these guys did that you just won't believe.
Yeah. How wonderful. Cliff Pfeiffer, thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you for letting me know about the ad. For the first time ever, the Veterans Breakfast Club decided to place an ad out there in media. And it was the first ad we've ever run. And it ran in two places, one in the VVA weekly email, and then one in the magazine, the VVA Veteran, that goes out to all the 86,000 VVA members. And it was a delight to hear that somebody actually saw it, and got the message. So thank you, Cliff.
Well, we just had our VVA meeting, our membership meeting here in Denver, and we had a stack of them on the table. And not everybody reads every little page in that magazine, but I pointed it out to the membership and the board of directors, so everybody knows about it.
Oh, good. That's great. Thank you, Cliff. Thanks for letting me know about that. That's the goal, is to, get the word out, let veterans know that they're welcome to come and join us and share a story, or just listen if they want. So thank you very much. Ken Gamble, you've been sitting patiently in Tennessee, waiting for a chance to talk about the work you've been doing. You are a Navy veteran. You served in Vietnam. Were you blue water or were you brown water?
I've been sitting here listening to these stories, okay? I was on an LST. We were in the rivers of Vietnam. Started out in 1964, and I was there until 66, in and out. Operation Market Time, we had 9 WPBs. That's Coast Guard cutters. We had 9 of them to run the Coast Guard like he was talking about. Operation Market Time. We were the first ones there to handle the coastal surveillance. We left there in 65. We went to Von Tau, which is the mouth of the Delta. We had 2 Hueys, Seawolves, aboard on their deck. We supported the PBRs and everything else that was on the river.
Can I ask you, Ken, what was the name of your LST?
LST 762, USS Floyd County.
Got it.
And then we would, the guys on the boats, we'd send the boats out. The boats would go out looking for VC or the North Vietnamese. When they would start taking fire, they would radio back to us. That's when we sent the Seawolves out. And they would mortar the positions the fires were coming from. Yeah, I'm well familiar with the Delta. I'm well familiar with Operation Market Time, Operation Game Warden. I got out in 66, just when 17 started. But yeah, I'm glad to hear these veterans talking about this, because we were considered the Gator Navy.
That's right. The Alligator Navy.
Yeah, the Gator Navy.
Right.
And the only out of from 64 to 66, the only liberty I got was on the banks of the river. We would check out baseball bats and baseballs or footballs. When we'd find a clear spot along the riverbank, we would beach that sucker, and then we'd go play baseball or football or what have you. We were out there rolling around, didn't understand why that area was cleared, but now we do. The default. That's why it was cleared out. That's the WPBs right there.
The WPB is this Coast Guard cutter right here, and this beautiful ship is the LST 762. And the bow doors would open, the great bow doors would open like 2 sets of doors. A ramp would come out, and then you could roll out tanks and vehicles outside of the hull of the ship onto beaches.
Or in a lot of cases, beer.
A lot of or beer. You could do beer. And these were
we did our thing. Now that's 3 of the 9 that we supported in the beginning. And we were at Phuc Qua Island, which is just right off of Cambodia. It is a Vietnam island, but it's more on the Cambodian side. And Anthoy, a little boat, you might say boat station there. That was the only thing when we got there that wasn't controlled by the VC. Everything else on that island was controlled by the VC. They even had the roads blocked. But then that's enough about me. Let me get into our foundation here.
Well, can I ask you, I know, Ken, I know you want to get, and I want you to get into the foundation. Were you, let me ask you this. When you were exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam, to defoliant in Vietnam, were you at all aware that there was a health concern, or what,
Listen, they told us, here's the exact thing they told us. This is not harmful to humans. It is not harmful to the land. It is not harmful to the water supply. That's what we were told. Out of every time we went to Vietnam, of course, we were, at Operation Market Time, we were over there for like 6 months. But then we came back, picked up a load of Marines and took them back into Chulai. Then we'd come back, pick up some CBs, take them to Da Nang, and then come back to the Philippines, pick up a tank deck full of beer and Marines. And Marines had to guard the beer, naturally. But we took the beer to Saigon, and stuff like that. But the biggest thing was in the rivers, taking ammunition, diesel fuel, and what have you to the boat stations there at the last, when they got the boat stations built. It was, and we would have to, when we was at the boat stations, we would have to set guards because of the vegetation floating down the river. The VC were famous for getting in that vegetation and floating around and coming up against a ship and put a mine on the ship's hull. So we had to, everything that floated down the river, we had to shoot at it, period. Didn't make any difference what it was. We had to shoot it. If you were on watch, you took your, at the time that I was over there, we were using the M14s, not the 16s. And, you just shot at anything that moved on the river. But that's that. Now, if you've got another question, shoot it to me, because I want to tell you about the foundation.
Okay, let's talk about your foundation. And here it is. It's called the Orange Heart Medal Foundation.
This is something that I started in actually late 2018. I started it because I after cancer and all kinds of different cancers, melanoma, prostate, basal cell, just you name it, I had it. But they got me and they say I'm in remission, so thank God for that. But I had to go through 46 sessions of radiation and 2.5 years of shots in the stomach. And then 5 years after that, I ended up back in the VA hospital. And I was in there with another guy. Of course, they had the curtain pulled between us, but he was suffering something terrible. He was just in agony and screaming and carrying on. And that was taking me right back to Vietnam. I told the doctor I had to get out of there. I said, you find me another room or I'm just checking out. I'm going home. Well, he couldn't find me another room. So he told me, he said, if you'll come back in tomorrow, promise me you'll come back tomorrow. He said, I'll let you go. So we did. But hearing this guy, that's when I was laying in the bed and I was just looking up at the ceiling and I said, something's got to be done. We need some recognition some way or another. So I got a pad on that little thing you run around that you put your meals on. And I just started sketching. And I'm thinking in my mind, well, we'll never get a Purple Heart because those are physical wounds.
Right.
And ours are internal. So since we're not going to get a Purple Heart, why not an Orange Heart? So I sketched this heart out. When I got home, I went on the computer and perfected it. Now, what's on the screen now is the foundation's logo. That is not the medal. That's just the logo.
Yeah. And I will show the medal.
Yeah. And so when we got, if you see it, I can show you the medal right here. If you can see it. I don't know if you can see it or not. But we, first year, since it started in August, we handed out 300 medals.
Mm.
Now I just went over 9,100 medals that have gone out, 9,120 something like that. We have promoted this, and all they have to do for this medal, we send it out free of charge. There's no charge to the veteran whatsoever. And all they have to do is go to the website and apply for it. Hit submit, it comes to my computer, I pack them up a medal and I send it to them. Now that website is orangeheartmedal.org. orangeheartmedal.org.
Go, and I'm gonna.
That's how they get to the website.
I'll share my
Since
screen.
Since we did this, I got with our state representative. We sat down and we wrote up a law. Well, Mr. Sabi Kumar is our state representative, and he asked me, he said, Ken, you want this to be a resolution or do you want it to be a law? I said, I want it to be a law. He said, well, we'll have to go make a joint resolution out of it. In other words, it'll have to pass the legislature, then it'll have to go to the Senate and pass the Senate. We put that bill on the floor February 4th, 2019. February 24th, the governor was signing it into law with zero opposition from both the legislature and the Senate. It was a done deal. Since then, I had written every senator, every congressman, trying to get them to do this nationally. Well, good luck with that. That's the only response I got back. And I only got it from 2 senators. But as of right now, we've got a bill in the Armed Service Committee. A congressman from New Jersey, Van Drew, wrote this bill up. And it's H.R. 4982. And like I say, it's been in the Armed Service Committee since August of last year. And we started a campaign to try to get it out of the Armed Service Committee and get it on the floor of Congress. And all in the world it is to get an Agent Orange medal for the Vietnam veterans, or if they're deceased, get it for their spouses or their wives. And but they're asking the DOD to furnish the medals and do an application and all of that. The same thing we've been doing for 4 years. They're just now getting around to doing this.
Right.
But I don't care what kind of design they've got or what. If it recognizes us as being exposed to Agent Orange and what have you, that to me that is great. You know, I have no problem with that.
Ken, it is great. I mean, what you've been doing is great. The first second I heard about an Orange Heart medal, I immediately knew what it was. I mean, it was just, it was a genius inspired idea. How do you recognize somebody who has been exposed to Agent Orange, which is a form of a friendly fire in a sense, and also a kind of a betrayal? You know, I mean, Vietnam veterans have been betrayed enough. And then you have...
It makes no difference whether it was friendly fire or not. We served our country. They lied to us every damn day over there. And we need the recognition. We need the recognition. And Washington will not recognize us as being wounded.
And that's it. It's a wound that's not only, and if you don't mind me editorializing just a bit, Ken, it's not only certainly the 17 presumptive illnesses that you could get from Agent Orange exposure. It could be any one of them, a lot of cancers. But there's another deeper moral, spiritual wound, I think, that veterans exposed to Agent Orange have suffered. And that is that sense of betrayal, that here you are doing your job and, trusting the authorities who are, in charge of this operation in Vietnam, and it just damages you for life.
Well, we don't know. We don't know half of what's behind that. But anyway, from that, getting that law on, we've got it in 7 states right now. And I just got a phone call from Minnesota, and they're putting that law on their floor. When they go back in session, it'll be there for them to vote on. So that'll give us 8 states that we've got so far that we've got this law in on their, whatever you call it.
So you go to people who are interested in either the law or ordering a medal can go to orangeheartmedal.org. That's orangeheartmedal.org. And they could learn not only about the medal and the advocacy work that you do, but also about the memorial that you've created in Springfield, Tennessee, which is quite an elaborate memorial. And I also noticed that Dr. William Silver on the program tonight is wearing the medal on his shirt. And if you could see William Silver behind him, you might see a globe and anchor behind him, which indicates that he might be a Marine. How are you doing, Bill?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Todd. And I really want to thank Ken for what he has done and what he is doing and trying to accomplish on behalf of all of us who were exposed to Agent Orange, which I was as well. And it's such an important reminder that Vietnam, those who served in Vietnam, experienced so many complex things with that war. And Todd, you bring out all of these things with the veterans, and I think that's so important. All of the different aspects of the war, the different types of service. And with this is just something else also that is often forgotten, and it shouldn't be. It's so important. It is a wound that many veterans are carrying and have died with. And so I want to say to Ken, because I only met Ken by phone. This is the first time that I've actually seen Ken, and Ken was so gracious. And as we were talking, and he sent this medal that I have on my chest, he sent that out to me, and I am so appreciative of that. And as I wear that in recognition of all the veterans, no matter what branch of service they were in, that were exposed and that have carried the wound. It's a wound of battle with this Agent Orange, and I'm just so thankful for that. And I'm thankful that tonight this portion of the discussion is dealing with that as well.
And Bill, you're the one who put me in touch with Ken, so I'm so grateful for that, Ken. And I'm grateful for the work that you do with the Orange Heart Medal Foundation. If people want to contact you and talk to you more about this, is the best way to contact you through the website, or should they email you, Ken?
Let me give you my email address, and let me give you my phone number.
Okay.
And I'm not bashful. I'll answer the phone anytime it rings. If I'm not on it, they may have to leave a message so I can call them back. But because I'm on the phone quite a bit, especially since the VFW National Magazine come out with the article on it.
Right.
But my email address is Ken Gamble. That's KenGamble 6868 @gmail.com. That's KenGamble68 @gmail.com. The telephone number is 615-973-5279. Now, our memorial has brought people in. When we have a celebration there, I have people coming in from all 50 states, Hawaii, Alaska, and every state in between. The first dedication, we had over 1,000 people come in for that dedication. Now, we have got 2 phases of it up. The third phase is on order. The only way that I can get these phases up is if these veterans or these widows put their husband's name on this memorial. Each cenotaph has 60 names on it. I'm working on the 11th one right now. When I get that 11th one done, then I will like the 12th one to finish phase 2. Then I go to phase 3. And it is, also next week, we are naming the highway in front of it, the Orange Heart Metal Parkway, the Orange Heart Memorial Parkway, I'm sorry. And then after we run out of the Orange Heart Memorial Parkway, we're naming a section for the Gold Star families. So that's coming up next week sometime.
And here is from your Facebook page, here's a picture of the memorial in Springfield, Tennessee. More information you could find on the Facebook page or on your website. Ken, you are a busy man.
Well, what you don't see here is that 3-foot orange heart that we've got on that memorial out front of this.
Okay.
And that really sets it off. Plus, we have the Gold Star family marker up there. And that we had to take exception to their bylaws in order to get it. But it's up there. It's really good. God's given me something to do to get rid of my PTSD, and buddy, he's working me to death.
And that's that you're doing it. You're doing it. Ken, thank you. I hope you join us again, Ken, and keep us up to date on what's going on, and also share more of your story.
Oh, okay. Anytime, pal.
Okay.
Anytime.
That'd be terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. I know that Casey Shelton from the Monuments Men and Women Foundation is also with us. They also do wonderful work. They're very different kind of work, dealing with finding and preserving art that was stolen during World War II. Sean, you have talked with Casey. Why don't you give her a little introduction?
Sure. Casey, so happy that you were able to join us. I know we were actually attempting to get a veteran of the Monuments Men and Women Foundation on. Fortunately, we weren't able to get him, but I'm happy to have you here join us in his stead and talk to us about the foundation. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Yeah. Thanks for having me. And like you said, you were Richard Baranczyk. He is the last known living monuments man. He will be, I believe, 99 or 98 this year. So he was a young guy when he joined the efforts. And I believe he was with the MPs and kind of did the guarding and kind of transports between the collecting points. But yeah, so the Monuments Men and Women Foundation, we're in Dallas, Texas, and we preserve the legacy of the Monuments Fine Arts and Archive section and kind of promote their legacy and history of what they did, but also at the same time continue their mission, because there's probably hundreds or thousands of missing cultural objects. So not just artworks, but other objects of significant cultural value that are still out there that, you know, we're kind of finishing their mission. Well, finishing would be a very large term, but continuing their mission.
Continuing the mission, right.
Right.
So,
Casey, what led you to start working with the Monuments Men Foundation?
So actually, I came out to Dallas. I saw the movie, the George Clooney did the Monuments movie in 2014. That's based off of the book, The Monuments Men, which was written by our founder and chairman, Robert M. Etzel. And I had seen the movie, and at the end, it had mentioned the foundation. And that summer, I was looking for an internship. So I came for an internship, and I've never left.
The stars aligned, and you were able to
exactly, yeah. So.
Was there a passion that you had previously for just artwork, or was it something about veteran, the World War II art that went missing and the cultural aspects of this that went missing during that time?
So I had a fascination in art history. Originally, I wanted to do art conservation, so the restoration of artworks, but I've always had a fascination with art history ever since I went to Europe when I was in high school. So, and in combination with that, my dad growing up, he was always telling me about the military and the different wars. So I kind of had an interest in military history as well. So I kind of blended the two together, art history and military history, and you get the Monuments Men.
I'd say this is very much both realms, is military and civilian history. But I'm guessing because of the movie specifically, we think of it more like a military history almost. And because initially the MFAA was a civil affairs section in the Allied armies. When combat operations were done and they moved over more to military government occupation, that's when the numbers swelled. So, during the combat, when you had monuments officers assigned to the armies, there weren't as many. But once the occupation came and they were also finding these millions of works of art that were hidden, caves, salt mines, castles, you name it. They swelled, and eventually their numbers were approximately 350 men and women, both military and civilian, and from 14 nations. So, and they worked from 1945 to 1951 in recovery and restitution of these artworks. And that's in addition to the ones who served during combat operations. And that was from about 1943 until the end of the war. I know I made you co-host, so you can share your screen if need be. So I'm sure some of this information might be in your presentation, but I figured also, highlight that as well, because I know you worked hard on that.
That's certainly. So let me share my screen and tell me if you can see it.
We can.
Great. All right. Back that up real quick. Right. So good evening. My name is Casey Shelton. I'm the senior researcher for the Monuments Men and Women Foundation. Like I said, we're in Dallas, Texas. The foundation honors the legacy of the men and women who served in the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives section, and their unprecedented and heroic work protecting and safeguarding our shared cultural heritage during World War II. This evening, I kind of want to go over their story, but also include some of the personal accounts of the Monuments Men and Women that our founder, Robert M. Etzel, and then also the foundation were fortunate enough to befriend over the last 20-some years. So let's get started.
In caves, in mines, and in isolated mountain hideouts, we found that Hitler and his gang had stored art treasures, paintings, statues, tapestries, jewelry, and all else that the Nazis knew mankind would pay much to rescue and to preserve.
So that was General Dwight D. Eisenhower recalling the discovery of the Nazi plunder. This was during his acceptance speech of a life fellowship from the Metropolitan Museum. And this was April 2nd, 1946, so shortly after the war. So from 33 to 45, the Nazi regime wielded art as a weapon of propaganda. They simultaneously elevated certain aesthetics while censoring and at times outright destroying works that did not conform to their ideologies and goals. Adolf Hitler, a failed artist, yet self-proclaimed artistic genius, imposed his personal biases through the full force of the state. Nazi leadership ultimately perpetrated the greatest theft in history, establishing vast organized looting operations in occupied European territories, targeting private and public collections, and in particular, the dispossession and genocide of Jewish people. So in 1942, when it was becoming evident that American forces were going to enter the European theater, various American scholars and museum officials began voicing concerns to the U.S. government and safeguarding the continent's cultural treasures. In June of 43, President Franklin Roosevelt authorized the creation of a government commission, what would be the American Commission for the Protection and Salvage of Artistic and Historic Monuments in War Areas, or more commonly known as the Roberts Commission after its chairman, Supreme Court Justice Owen Roberts. So the work of the commission ultimately led to the creation of the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program, first under the civil affairs sections of the Allied armies and later the various military government organizations. And pictured here is the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., where the Roberts Commission worked from. So like I previously mentioned, all 350, approximately 350 monuments men were never serving in the theater all at once. They were from 14 nations and accomplished the nearly impossible feat of locating and returning more than 4 million cultural objects to their rightful owners in just the 6 years from the end of the war in 45 until the last central collecting point closed in 51. So how did it develop? Well, the individual initiatives of a few British officers to protect monuments and archaeological sites in North Africa were the very early blueprints for the civil affairs organization of the MFAA in the Mediterranean theater and later European theater. And then I'd also like to add that after the European theater, there was also a small monuments men operation in Japan for the Pacific theater, although much smaller in scale and kind of a different emphasis, more on protection and inspection of monuments in the Pacific and Asian countries. And the British officers who took on the individual initiatives in North Africa would become monuments men in Italy. So here we have pictured on the left a out of bounds sign, which they put up on protected monuments and sites to kind of further preserve them. And on the right, a guard guarding one of the many archaeological sites, most likely probably Roman, that were in the North African theater. So when military officials created the Office of Advisor on Fine Arts and Monuments, it was under the Allied Military Government of Occupied Territories, or AMGOT. Captain Mason Hammond was selected as the first American monuments man in the field. He arrived in Algeria in June of 43, where he planned for the invasion of Sicily and instructed military personnel on the preservation and safeguarding of cultural heritage that they would be encountering in Europe. Hammond's work in Sicily was instrumental in furthering developing the MFAA program. It provided invaluable feedback for when the MFAA subcommission was formed that fall under the new Allied military government, and the additional MFAA personnel began entering theaters. And the MFAA had the full support from General Eisenhower. In December 43, he issued a directive to his commanders, and in part it read, "Today we are fighting in a country which has contributed a great deal to our cultural inheritance, a country rich in monuments by which their creation helped and now in their old age illustrate the growth of civilization which is ours. We are bound to respect those monuments so far as war allows." So the MFAA in Italy was composed of over 30 American and British personnel who advanced with Allied armies up the Italian peninsula. They assessed damage and effected repairs where they could, while also working with military personnel and the local population to further safeguard cultural monuments and sites. American monuments officers Captain Dean Keller and Lieutenant Frederick Hart, pictured here, were instrumental in the recovery of some of Italy's most treasured cultural heritage, including the Florentine collections. With the outbreak of war, the collections were evacuated out of Florence to privately owned villas and palazzos in the Tuscan countryside. And pictured here on the left and the right is the world famous Uffizi Gallery in Florence. After its corridors were shelled, center is the historic city center with smoke rising from the German shelling. And actually in the picture on the left, you can actually see the street below from the hole that was left in the side of the wall from the German shelling. Several of these repositories out in the Tuscan countryside were discovered by the Germans, who transported the works north as they retreated towards the Reich and from the advancing Allies. The Florentine treasures were discovered at war's end in the Italian Alps, in an abandoned jail in San Leonardo, and also a repository nearby in Campo Turres. The collection at that time was valued in excess of $500 million. I don't know if anyone wants to do the math, but I suspect it's the low billions now. So the treasured artworks returned home in July of 1945. 6 loaded trucks followed a Jeep column transporting Hart and Keller, into the Piazza della Signoria to much fanfare. And you can see here the trumpeters and the American Jeep with the American and the Italian flag driving past the military and city officials up on the left here. So moving to the ETO, approximately 24 monuments men served in the European theater during the combat operations, with the first officers arriving in Normandy shortly after the D-Day invasions. Armed with their list of cultural significant monuments and sites, they advanced through the theater with combat units, informing commanders of what not to bomb or billet in, and documenting the damage already inflicted while making efforts to mitigate any further destruction. Pictured here is Monumentsman Captain Walker Hancock, and he's assisting locals in relocating the Madonna of L'Église in Belgium. And this was because the church that it was housed in was badly damaged during the Battle of the Bulge. So as the Allies advanced into the Reich in the closing months and weeks of the war, the mission of the MFAA transitioned from preservation and triage of immovable monuments and sites to locating and recovering the millions of cultural objects that had been displaced by Nazi theft and war. More than 1,400 repositories, many in mines, castles, tunnels, monasteries, churches, were discovered in just the American occupational zone alone. In fact, in his 1958 dissertation, Monumentsman Leslie Post conservatively estimated that some 15 million objects had been relocated to these repositories, but not all the contents were loot. German collections, most of them from public institutions, were stored among the plunder for safeguarding. So in this instance, in these pictures right here, this is the Merkers salt mine. And Merkers held the Third Reich's gold reserves in addition to the works of art from the German public collections. So to the left, on top of the mine cart, is Monet's in the Conservatory from Berlin's National Gallery. And to the right, a US Army sergeant holds engravings from Albrecht Dürer's Apocalypse series. And then on the left, we have Monumentsmen Lieutenant Dale Ford and Sergeant Harry Ettlinger, and they are holding Rembrandt's self-portrait from the Staatliche Kunsthalle in Karlsruhe, and that's in Germany. And on the right, Lieutenant George Stout, who was a pivotal figure in the development and execution of the MFA program in the European theater and also later Pacific theater, is pictured with the central panel of the Ghent altarpiece in the Altalsee salt mine in Austria. This was one of the largest Nazi repositories for looted works of art, including those works which had been destined for the Führer Museum in Linz. And then now I have a part of an interview with Harry Ettlinger. He was a good friend of the foundation for many years.
Well, that of course the way of first time my experience over here in that particular mine was something new. On it. I will say that my main effort was usually done where the underground factories and where the storage, where the boxes were located, which were on a second floor, but they were these huge chambers, 60 feet wide by 40 feet high by a mile long. And I must say in retrospect that I never went to the ends of one of them where they were doing the mining of the salt itself. Well, one of the things that you should be probably aware of, that one of the prime depositors happened to be over here from the art museum, the Kunsthalle, from the city that I was born in and lived 3 blocks away and had seen the contents before, you know, in my study, because while my grandfather was a minor patron of the arts, he was a collector of prints, you know, which I later on found we discovered over here with one of the few collections which was not by the Nazis, because they were, it was called art. There were artists over here that lived in the early part of the 20th century. So to me, it was almost like old homecoming. You know, I'd seen some of the paintings before as a kid over here. Of course, limited, because as a Jewish person, you after a while you were not permitted to go to museums or to any place over here of a public nature.
It would have been a logistical nightmare if Allied policy facilitated the return of these objects directly to their individual owners from these repositories. The solution was to evacuate the contents and transport them to collecting points where they could be processed, identified, sorted, and returned through a formal restitution procedure. The Americans consolidated operations to 4 central collecting points. From there, the Allies agreed to the policy of external and internal restitutions. Countries seeking objects confiscated or removed from their territories would notify the collecting points, which in turn would identify and return said objects to their countries of origin. Once returned to their country, those objects would pass to the internal governmental agencies and organizations, which would complete the last step of the restitution to the rightful owner. On some occasions, the collecting points did deal with individuals through direct Jewish claims. So on the top left, we have the Marburg Central Collecting Point. It was the first collecting point established, never intended to be a major collecting point. Marburg ceased operations in June of '46, and that summer transferred its remaining objects and records to the Wiesbaden collecting point. When Marburg shuttered operations, the remaining 3 collecting points became specialized. The Wiesbaden Central Collecting Point, which is on the bottom left, handled mainly objects from the German public collections that had been stored for safekeeping. The Offenbach Archival Depot, the top right, dealt with archival materials and Judaica. And lastly, the Munich Central Collecting Point on the bottom right processed the objects that had been confiscated by the Nazis. MFAA personnel, with assistance from foreign restitution officers and German civilians, facilitated the restitutions throughout Europe through these 4 facilities.
There I came to Wiesbaden, Germany, and Farmer had been there about almost a month already. He had set up all the security around, a big telephone poles stuck in the ground with barbed wire all around the place. And then on the top of each one, lights going both ways. Inside and outside, 2 GIs, 24 hours, were going around country all the time to give us the security for a museum. At this time, we had to get rid of the DPs, displaced persons who were living in the basement, and a couple of GIs, spillovers. They were living there. We had to get rid of them. We had to look for bombs. We found 3 small bombs. We got rid of them. And that was when the 56 truckloads of huge truckloads full of art of about 13 museums in Berlin came to us from the Reichsbank in Frankfurt.
So that was Dr. Ken Lindsay. On the left is a younger Corporal Kenneth Lindsay with his foot up on the table. So it was Lindsay along with Walter Farmer who established the Wiesbaden Central Collecting Point. So with the majority of the repository contents deemed objects from legitimate German collections, the MFAA had to identify and care for these objects until they could be restituted. The Army chose the Landesmuseum in Wiesbaden. It had suffered little bombing damage, even though its 2,000 windows had been blown out and a portion of its roof was missing. I guess it was minor compared to the surrounding structures. Monuments Men Captain Walter Farmer, who's pictured right with the bust of Nefertiti, was joined by Corporal Kenneth Lindsay, and they were given less than 2 months to prepare the structure for the German collections being transferred from the Reichsbank in Frankfurt. The Wiesbaden Central Collecting Point received its first shipment August 20th, 1945, and at its height, it held approximately 700,000 objects. The Offenbach Archival Depot was the sole depot designated for processing of archival materials and Judaica. So from March of 46 until its closure in June of 49, it operated from the requisitioned I.G. Farber building. It handled more than 2.5 million objects, in large part thanks to the ingenious sorting system, which is pictured in action on the right, that was created by its second director, Captain Isaac Bankwitz. So to the left, Chaplain Samuel Blinder inspects Torah scrolls in the basement of the Race Institute in Frankfurt. So these scrolls would have eventually been transported to the Offenbach Archival Depot for restitution. And yes, I'm pretty sure that's the ceiling, just to give you an understanding of how high that pile was. So pictured now are Bankwitz catalogs of ex libris and bookmarkings organized by country. This system allowed the collecting point personnel to sort through the millions of archival items, mostly books, without knowing the languages they were written in, because these objects came from all sorts of European countries that had been occupied, and the Nazis had looted material and brought it into the Reich. So next are interview clips from Colonel Seymour Pomerantz. He was the first director before Captain Bankwitz.
Well, I was stationed in Stuttgart as the U.S. archivist for the southern part of occupied Germany. And all of a sudden I get an order from General Clay saying that I'm to report to a town called Offenbach. I didn't know where Offenbach was. And so my friend Leslie Post, Dr. Leslie Post, who had been around and was a librarian for the US zone of Germany, decided to take me in his Jeep up to Offenbach. In the late February 1946, I went with Leslie to Offenbach and found a huge multi-floor building filled with books, with archives, with paraphernalia, with Torahs, with many, many wonderful objects which the Nazis had stolen from countries in Europe. Eventually, the depot had over 3 million items, and we have lists of those items, which the Nazis had taken from 15 countries, including Eastern Europe, which they sent to Frankfurt am Main, and then transported from there to Offenbach for safekeeping. I felt that it was an impossible task that I was given. I had been in China, India, Burma before, and had been transported to the United States, and from there I was sent to Germany. So that this experience was an unusual experience. I just had to stand back and think about it day and night. For the first weeks, I could hardly sleep to figure out what to do and how to get rid of this material legally.
So the third specialized collecting point was the Munich Central Collecting Point. The majority of the looted cultural objects recovered by the MFAA were in Bavaria, in major repositories such as Neuschwanstein Castle. So it seemed logical that the collecting point established primarily for processing looted objects would be established in Munich. Operations began in July of 1945 under the directorship of Lieutenant Craig Hughes Smythe. Smythe requisitioned 2 buildings, including the Führerbau in Munich's Königsplatz. One of its later directors, monumentsman Frederick Pleasance, is actually pictured on the far right with a Raphael Madonna from the Bavarian State Paintings collection. In addition to looted objects, the collecting point also processed the Bavarian state collections. The Munich Central Collecting Point was the largest of the collecting points, and at its height held in excess 1 million objects. Plundered objects from the ERR, artworks destined for the Führer Museum, Goering's personal collection, all of them passed through the doors. So on the left is the arrival of the Bruges Madonna. It's the only sculpture by Michelangelo transported out of Italy during his lifetime, and it was transported to the collecting point from the Alsace salt mine. It was among the token restitutions ordered by General Eisenhower as a gesture of goodwill by the United States to its allies in the autumn of 45. It was also the first shipment where the receiving nation, Belgium, had come to the collecting point to claim its cultural property. So Munich and Wiesbaden were the last two central collecting points to close in August of 51. With some rare exceptions, the custody of the cultural objects that remained at the collecting points at that time were transferred to European civilian agencies, if not already shipped off to the governments of their respective countries of origin for ongoing internal restitution. Ultimately, the US had to shift its focus from post-World War II reconstruction of Europe to the intensifying Cold War. So the American records were packed up and shipped to the Army Record Centers in the United States. Now they are with the National Archives and Records Administration. Restitutions were ongoing in the second half of the 20th century, including those pursued by Ardelia Hall in the United States as the monuments advisor for the State Department. A State Department bulletin on missing works is seen here. You can see Raphael's portrait of a young man, which is considered the most important work of art still missing, is featured among works sought by Poland. But these efforts in restitution by no means match the extent of the restitutions from those first 6 years after the war in the theater. So is art worth a life? Captain Dean Keller, who served with the MFAA in Italy, once stated that the life of one American boy was worth infinitely more to him than any monument he knew. Yet the monument's men and women believed in service to their cause and that civilization's shared cultural heritage was worth saving. 2 monuments men lost their lives in active service with the MFAA. Walter Huchthausen was an MFAA officer assigned to the 9th U.S. Army. He was killed on April 2nd, 1945 by German machine gun fire when he and fellow monuments officer Sheldon Keck were driving north of the Ruhr Pocket to investigate a claim on looted cultural property. Ronald Balfour was the MFAA officer assigned to the 1st Canadian Army, and he was killed by a shell burst in the streets of Kiev, Germany on March 10, 1945. He was assisting citizens in transporting a medieval altar place to safety. In September of 2012, our founder and chairman, Robert M. Etzel, and monumentsman Harry Ettlinger, who spoke earlier in this presentation, visited the grave of Huchthausen in Margraten in the Netherlands. He's buried in the American Cemetery.
I went to my superintendent, who was a Harvard man and inclined to support a Radcliffe graduate, and told him that I'd like to apply. And he said, I'll do everything I can to help you. So that's how I got to begin to apply for the first officer candidate class and of the WAAC. And there were, I think, 40,000 American women applied. They took only 450 of us from the country. We were delighted to have normal women in uniform with the Lady Churchill and her daughter. It raised the general level. Our general reputation was we were all whores, period. And we were making a real effort to show it was the beginning of opening up the glass ceiling, really.
So this past month, the foundation celebrated our 15th anniversary, and we also changed our name. We went from the Monuments Men Foundation for the Preservation of Art to the Monuments Men and Women Foundation. And this is in recognition that not all monuments men were men. In fact, 27 women served with the MFAA, including Mary Regan Quisenberry, who you just saw. In addition to her, the foundation was also fortunate enough to know Modoko Fujishiro Huthwaite. She was a Japanese-American teenager who actually volunteered to work in the offices of the Monuments Men in Japan.
All our humanitarian values, peace, beauty, truth, joy, that's all in the arts. That's what you want to pass on to the next generation, the following generations. The beauty, truth, joy, just some of the things that they stand for. Things of enduring value.
October 22nd, 2015 was an important day for the foundation and also the Monuments Men and Women. The United States Congress presented the Monuments Men and Women with the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest civilian honors bestowed by the United States. 3 Monuments Men and 1 Monuments Woman were presented the award in a ceremony in Emancipation Hall in the Capitol building. And I was actually lucky enough to attend it, and it was quite an event.
Freedom enjoyed by this country from the desolation that has swept over so many others during the past years gives to America greater opportunity than ever before to become the greatest of the world's repositories of art. The whole world will then have a right to look to us with grateful eyes. But we will fail unless we consciously appreciate the value of art in our lives and take practical steps to encourage the artist and preserve his works. In no walk of life can man fail to find richer experience as he falls under the influence of beauty, immortalized by inspired genius. Even for the roughest of soldiers, there is more of ancient Egyptian history to be felt and understood in a lonely, graceful column rising against the sky in a naked field than there is in all the descriptive matter that was ever written on the subject. The Metropolitan will be a more priceless treasure of the America of centuries hence, even than it is today. It is our privilege to pass on to the coming centuries treasures of past ages.
So a little bit more about the foundation, how we carry on the mission and legacy of the Monuments Men and Women. So we educate the public of their efforts after the war, and we also continue to return cultural objects still missing. So like I mentioned, millions of objects were stolen. So there's still hundreds of thousands most likely missing. I believe Poland alone has reported 60,000 objects. In the foundation's 15 years, we've been fortunate enough to not only befriend monuments men, but other veterans, and returning over 30 cultural objects that were brought back to the United States by US servicemen as souvenirs of their service. So in the instance pictured, veteran John Pistone brought back a Gamelda Gallery Linz album. So these albums were created personally for Hitler to review the works of art that he had selected for his planned Führer Museum in Linz. And Mr. Pistone took it from the Berghof at the end of the war as a souvenir, and he took it back to Ohio. And it's now with the other Linz albums that have been discovered, some are still missing, and returned to Germany.
Casey, if I may interrupt,
sure.
We've gone a bit over time on a normal evening. Not a problem though, because this is really fascinating history, and I really appreciate all of this historical perspective. But I wanted to allow at least a little bit of time here for anybody who may have some questions at the end. I know I wrote down a list, but won't be able to get to them all tonight.
Certainly, yeah. I just wanted to say real quick, our latest initiative, so we created a most wanted playing cards, kind of in the military tradition of most wanted cards, and they feature the most wanted works of art. So I just wanted to get that picture on the screen as well.
That's a good idea, Todd. We need a VBC play deck.
That is so cool. That is such a great idea. How many works are missing? How many works are still yet to be discovered, do you think?
That is an unknown number. I'm going to say in terms of works of art, when I say hundreds of thousands, that's including cultural objects. So it's not necessarily just paintings or sculptures. That's other objects of cultural significance, whether, anthropological, etc. But I mean, it's to us the greatest theft in history.
Yeah. And 15 million art objects squirreled away in the Reich in 1945. Just I had no idea that the number was that high. Ken Kazak is a real art aficionado, especially with Vermeer. Ken, if you're still on, I know that you have a question or a story that you know about Hermann Göring, and you know that Göring was just a voracious consumer and stealer of art.
Todd, Casey, I didn't know you were going to be on this show. I am so glad you're on here. I got tears in my eyes, but I think the audience might appreciate the story of Han van Meegeren and how he tricked Hermann Göring.
Yeah, so he duped Göring. It's a forgery of a Vermeer. Göring thought it was a real Vermeer, traded it for other paintings, and I believe monetary, I think currency as well. At the end of the war, it was recovered, and turns out it was a fake.
And by the way, can I just make it a quick aside here?
Yeah.
So it was a U.S. officer that went to Göring's cell and said, "Hey, you know that Vermeer painting that you love so much? It was a fake." And Göring said, "How could people be so ruthless? Oh, how could they be so mean?"
Gosh.
Oh, Casey, this is great. Listen, I'm going to DC soon. I'm trying to see the fake Van Meegerens in the National Gallery. Can you help me out with that?
Unfortunately, no. But yeah, no, it's a fascinating story. And Monuments Man Harry Anderson, he was the one who recovered Göring's collection. And not only did he recover it, what was stored in Berchtesgaden, so that was in tunnels, abandoned train cars, etc. He also took a trip over to Fishhorn Castle, where Göring's wife was, and confiscated those paintings as well.
By the way, it's going to sound pretentious. I got to add one more thing. So on that medal, they have an image of Vermeer's The Astronomer. Yeah. And Hitler and his cronies stole that on the left-hand side from the Rothschilds family. It's in the Louvre, but on the back of that painting, the Nazi swastika is stamped on the back of that painting in the Louvre.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was given an ERR code as well, which was the Nazi looting agency in predominantly in France.
Yes, listen, Casey, I'm thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ken, I think as you said to me at one point in another discussion, that if Göring had given as much attention to the Battle of Britain as he did looting art, it probably would have won. Germany probably would have won that battle.
Who knows? But you know what, Todd, as I said, the British had the Spitfire, so who knows what would have happened.
Right.
Casey, do you want to let us know how people can donate to the foundation?
Sure. If you visit our website, it's monumentsmenandwomenfnd.org. And that you can donate through our website. We also have it through Facebook as well. In addition to that, we also have a contact form if you want to sign up for our newsletter or any social media posts. And then we also have a form for anyone who may have an item that came back from the war. Like I mentioned, veterans brought souvenirs back. For instance, the Gamelda Gallery Linz albums that Mr. Pistone had brought back, they are included in our deck of cards as one of the jokers because they are historically priceless. and knowing, the Nazi theft and what they coveted, in this instance for Hitler's planned Führer Museum. So.
That is cool. That is cool. I think we're going to share the deck of cards maybe in a blog or in our VBC Bulletin email, because I just think that's such a great idea and it's so interesting. I'm curious.
Yeah, so they're available for purchase on our e-store, and in addition to the cards, because you only have so much space, each card has an extended write-up on our website. So you can go to our website, select each card, and read additional information about the collection that these works were taken from, and then also circumstances of loss during the Nazi era.
Great idea. We could have a whole deck, Todd, of veterans and QR codes to visit our website and listen to their interviews.
I love it. I'm serious. I think that's
Julia needs to be like the Queen of Hearts.
Definitely the queen of my heart for sure. Julia Parsons.
You knocked that out of the park. Well done.
Casey Shelton, thank you so much from the Monuments Men and Women Foundation. And thank you, Ken Gamble from the Orange Heart Medal Foundation. And to all of you for joining us tonight. I know that we went over, but what a fascinating conversation. If anybody has, unless anybody has another question or comment that they want to squeeze in. Oh, before we go, I do know, let's see here. Scott Masters, are you still on the program?
Yep, I'm still here.
Oh, good. Hey, Casey, can you stop sharing your screen for a second?
Yeah.
Before we leave, I want Scott, you were in the United States for the first time since COVID just last week, were you not?
Yeah, over the last week and a half or so.
Over the last week and a half, and you ended up meeting with some of our veterans down here south. If you don't know Scott Masters, he's Canada's greatest history teacher. Everybody in Canada knows him, but he teaches at Crestwood Preparatory College in Toronto. He came south of the border recently and ended up meeting with many of our veterans, including Sam Christie, I see in the upper left, our Donut Dolly from Vietnam. I see Art Morrow there in the lower left. You met with him in North Carolina. This is so cool. How many places did you stop and people did you meet?
I think I met about 11, if I remember the numbers correctly. And that's both in Canada and the US. I kind of plotted out a trip based on the Veterans Breakfast Club.
I cannot believe I've met somebody nerdier than me.
I know.
I don't know whether to be grateful or jealous. I mean, it's so cool. This is exactly the kind of vacation that I would try and plot out with my family. This is so neat, Scott. Thank you so much for kind of letting me know about these people that you met. And I think it's so neat that, for example, Art Morrow, World War II veteran, Naval Academy graduate, was on our program. You only met him on Zoom. Sam Christie, Jean Christie, you met her on Zoom, and now we're able to meet them in person. I think that's so great.
Yeah, and the two of them in particular lived in the most beautiful places imaginable. That's the view off Sam's deck there. Just incredible.
Oh, how great. Cape Cod or somewhere in Massachusetts, right?
Up in Maine.
Up in Maine. Okay, that's it. All right. Right. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for joining us tonight and for sharing these pictures. And I know Connor Ritchie, I know that you have a conversation. Can we hold that for the next program? I know you had a conversation with some veterans recently. Let's hold that for the next program because we are already over time. I do want to encourage people, if they can, to take the Survey Monkey survey. We have it in the chat here on the Zoom side, just to let us know. It's 3 simple questions. How would you like? What can we improve about the last program that you experienced? So thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Ken Gamble. I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.